the topic that arose here, why enterprise architecture needs solution architects, has actually an interesting genesis back to 2002 when I was working for the Air Force and trying to work with their enterprise architects. I was working more as a logistics and knowledge management specialist at that time, and I found that we had a lot of enterprise architects, but they weren't really very useful. They just seemed to be doing their own thing. And so I set up a conference in February of 2002, and it was Enterprise Architecture and Portals. And the whole point was there's a chasm between what enterprise architects were doing and what was a hot topic at the time, if you will, for solution architects. That would be to set up an enterprise-wide portal. And I said, how could that be, that there's a big chasm, that the enterprise architects aren't helping on the big solution endeavors? And so this is a topic that goes back quite a ways for me. That's 14 years already. But here we are, and I find that, in fact, the way I'm framing it is I think enterprise architecture needs to have solution architects on the team, closely embedded, and in some cases even some solution engineers. But we're going to stick with the solution architects part initially here. So Maury introduced the topic a little bit, and of course I'm going to be your only speaker for today, but I did want to give you the chance to interact. And you can go to sli.do or slido.com, either one, and you can enter the event 9602, and you'll be able to ask questions, also to make comments. You can reply to other people's questions, and also you'll be able to take the poll. I have a 5-question poll there, so you can click between questions and polls. But go ahead and take the 5-question poll as we get set up here. Again, you can just go to sli.do or slido.com, enter event 9602, and you'll have the option of questions or polls. So a poll is active, but you can ask questions at any time. Just toggle over to that. So again, as I said, we're recording this. And again, I have a lot of examples I'm going to provide to you, but I want you to feel free to chat with questions or post your questions. And we actually have a moderator who's looking at questions and going to stop me every once in a while so that we can go ahead and address some of the questions in the flow of things. And we expect a few more people to join us, but in any case, I'm sure we have some folks with excellent insights and would like to share that as well. So you can share as a question or as a comment on Slido, and you can also go ahead and speak up if you like and ask your question directly. So bottom line is, I think that a lot of CIOs and CTOs, if they're familiar with the term solution architect at all, they think of a solution architect as a problem solver. And often they think of the enterprise architect more as an advisor. And I think that we kind of need the two to work more closely together in order to deliver successful solutions in a timely fashion. And everybody's the winner if that can happen. So I want to give a little more insight into what I see as the difference between enterprise and solution architecture and how I see their intersection coming in to play. So solution architects are often actually in very high demand as enterprise architects. So that's one thing. Often you'll see a job advertisement for an enterprise architect, and actually they're asking for a solution architect, somebody with 15 years of deep experience in SAP. And they say, we need you to be our enterprise architect because we're an SAP shop. Well, just because you have deep expertise in one solution doesn't make you necessarily a good candidate to lead an enterprise architecture team where you're looking across your whole complex architecture landscape. But solution architects know what it takes to land their solution, and that's very valuable knowledge, especially in a very large organization with all the competition for attention and so forth. So solution architects, good ones, and we're assuming we have mature, experienced ones here, understand design options and trade-offs between the different options as they recommend building blocks for the new or enhanced capability. They pull together subject matter experts as necessary upfront and throughout the process to try to identify and mitigate delivery risk. Enterprise architecture is necessary to optimize solutions across the whole organization or landscape, however you've scoped it, within an enterprise or across enterprises, in an extended enterprise use case. EAs bring the big picture, encourage collaboration, integration, and standardization of the business system landscape. And that's looking at what you have now, plus looking over time. So solution architects can create long-term difficulties if not guided by an overarching enterprise architecture approach, by a big picture, because of course they want to land their solution, so they'll do whatever it takes to land their solution. Could lead to what we call technical debt, which is another way to say we have a siloed solution. We're not quite sure how it works, but it works until it doesn't work, and then we have issues. So one of the big emphasis areas for a lot of enterprise architecture teams these days is to actually kind of solution oriented, is just to resolve the technical debt that has built up over time from allowing very smart people to land their solutions successfully, but not in light of the bigger picture, unfortunately. It's often a tactical necessity. But in any case, if EA is separated from SA, you have a problem. If SA is separated from EA, either way. So it can be a win-win if you combine them together and then furthermore link them to the world of Agile in terms of the engineering side of the house. So I want to be clear what is not enterprise architecture here, since that's the main topic. We're just showing how important it is that we be seen as problem solvers, and why not go ahead and bring problem solvers into the equation a little bit more. So digitizing isn't EA by itself. Testing or introducing new technologies, that's not EA. Designing, planning, and delivering siloed system changes is not EA. And iterative parallel solution architecture projects, they don't add up to EA. So all that stuff was done before EA ever existed, using a mix of generalist and specialist, but without, again, the big picture. So what makes EA kind of distinctive is that it is big picture. Is what do we need to not only have one capability, but all the capabilities necessary for our scope landscape now and over time as we change. So briefly, the solution architect is responding to specific problems and requirements, accountable for the solution vision, like this is how the ERP system will work, so a high-level design and a low-level design that would be builder-ready. So solution architects adapt milestone documents to circumstances, to direct, coordinate, and govern subject matter and technical experts, ensure the quality, the comprehensiveness, consistency, and coherency of a solution architecture. And so they need breadth and depth of knowledge in one domain, a domain that's a problem area or opportunity area that may take years to resolve. So in fact, when you say you have 15 years of working ERP, SAP ERP, it might be to do just maybe a couple, 2 or 3 big landings in a big organization. So again, long-term engagement, lots of breadth and depth of knowledge, but in that often in maybe ERPs, not just SAP, but perhaps in ERPs and how to land ERPs. But that's quite a different skill set from being an enterprise architecture, being a big picture guy. You can use the same analogy a little bit with what's the difference between a project manager and an enterprise architect. So project manager might be really good at planning a project and managing a project. That doesn't mean that they know what are all the building blocks and can help with the choices of building blocks as you move from your existing capability to a newer enhanced capability. And so bring all the right players together early on through the design thinking and from different perspectives, and ultimately build roadmaps, right? So project managers have quite a different role. But as I say, roadmaps is something actually that solution architects can be invaluable for, is actually building a meaningful roadmap after the enterprise architects have brought together a lot of the high-level requirements for an architecture vision. We'll give you an example here in just a moment, but just looking at the solution, you could have the high-level vision, and then you could go down to low-level design, again, builder-ready specification. But solution architecture is not the same as enterprise architecture. So we're not trying to say it's the same, but we are saying that we need more solution architecture skills on the EA team, whether it's integrated into a full-time team or matrixed, which means that the solution architects need to be better oriented to enterprise architecture. And that's partially what we'll be discussing as we move through this material, because a lot of it is associated with actually courses that we teach that help enterprise architects understand architecture writ large, not just enterprise architecture, and same thing for solution or software architects, understand what does being an architect mean, and how do you work across different levels of architecture, from very strategic to very, very incremental. So it's still architecture, but again, different skill sets, different timelines, and so on. So adding a higher level EA perspective is again when we're talking enterprise architecture versus just solution architecture. So we're looking at, when we talk about an enterprise, then we're not looking at just an ERP system. We're looking at an organization or a business or extended initiative that shares goals and a budget and has many business systems. So again, think architecture landscape that needs to be understood from many perspectives: the business, the technology perspectives, the data perspectives. And so the EA perspective is strategic, organization-wide, portfolio management, standardization, and integration challenge perspective of all your business systems and how they're adding up to give you capability now, and then how changes in building blocks could affect that capability or any particular capability going forward. So it's a layer on top of solution architecture. It needs to be very knowledgeable about all the solution architecture work that needs to be done, that is being done, that is going to then lead to engineering, successful engineering of the articulated vision change. So what makes the EA's perspective necessary? Again, think mastery of the architecture landscape, a need for cross-organizational integration and standardization, the integration of information, of data structures, of process structures, and understanding of your not just the architecture landscape writ large, but your application landscape, your platform landscape, and again, all your solutions and project portfolio elements in order to, again, to extrapolate from what they are and to innovate if you don't want to just continue down the same path. So the EA perspective, taking a definition from the book Enterprise Architecture as Strategy, is an organizing logic for business processes and the supporting infrastructure that reflects integration and standardization tied to the kind of operating model that you have as an organization. A lot of jargon in this definition, but it's important because it helps to explain that enterprise architecture as a discipline is more closely linked to business strategy than it is to the more lower level problem solving. And that's why I'm advocating that we need to integrate the solution architects more. But at this higher level operating model perspective, there are 4 operating models. And if you have a high integration of your business processes and the associated data for them, then you're going to be coordinated or unified. And if you have low, then you're diversified or replicated. But then you look at the standardization of your processes, and then you can focus in. So if you're high integration of your processes and data, associated data, and high standardization of business processes, you'd be a unified model. So you'd be sharing the same, operating like one big business like Walmart, for example, whereas replicated would be a franchise model, coordinated would be more of a financial services type of model. We have your money in the banking, in your checking account. We want to sell you a mortgage too. So 2 different lines of business, but sharing the same information about the client, whereas a diversified is self-explanatory. But just because you are a conglomerate doesn't mean that every initiative you do has to be diversified, where you're not sharing data and you're not standardizing processes. But you need to know kind of where you're starting at, so that as you scope an initiative, you come up with what are the requirements, what makes sense in terms of integration and standardization in light of where we're starting at and where we want to get to over time with our initiative. So this is a little bit more, again, looking at EA at a high level at the business operating model, as I was just describing, again, with a lot of and again, the distinction here is I'm trying to make a distinction between enterprise architecture with these type of operating models, whereas versus solution architecture, we have the expertise in solving a particular problem. So quite varied there. So EA is political before it's technical. So to start an EA function, you need a sponsor who believes that that EA perspective is needed that I just described. You need an EA team manager to ensure that the EA's perspective is taken and used. Otherwise, you just have a lot of maybe brilliant architects doing stuff, but it's not clear how you're guiding this, how you're linking to the business strategy in a coherent, consistent way if you haven't formalized and matured your enterprise architecture. So even in theory, EA is not good if it's not mature. And similarly, I was saying we have to assume certain maturity with solution architecture. So this comes into play with the poll that I've set up on Slido. So I encourage you to take a moment and go to that poll. And it does ask you some relevant questions about maturity of enterprise architecture, maturity of your solution architecture. That is a very important aspect of architecture. Often we just assume maturity, or we assume we'll never have it, one of the two extremes. But in fact, setting up a formal EA program that, for example, brought in solution architecture, that could be important. That could give you important attributes in terms of what actions do you need to take so that you have the synergy between the enterprise architects trying to link to and derive from the strategy, and the solution architects trying to then link to the engineering. So it is the maturity attributes would come into play in that. So we could have a special maturity model just for that. The integration or synergy between the enterprise architects and the solution architects could be an important attribute. So again, in short, the enterprise architect, highest and most strategic level, although we can chunk problems, certainly, we're gonna do, for example, a next generation hotel. So it doesn't mean that we have to kind of raise all our existing hotels and start from scratch. We have to, part of enterprise architecture planning is design thinking. Where does it make sense to start our next generation hotel? Maybe we start a new chain of hotels, or maybe we buy a new chain, and that'll be our subsidiary of next generation. So again, it's up at the strategic level, but it might be scoped something small initially, but guided by principles to where it could be scalable, could be flexible. At the same time, of course, looking for security issues across your landscape as well. So enterprise architecture looks for opportunities for integration of systems and improvement of data quality so that you can share, that you can scale, that you can reuse. So principles are inherent in a mature EA. Principles of that sort, data principles, application principles, business principles, and so on. And a big part of enterprise architecture is the visioning, the design thinking. What is it we're trying to achieve? What is the next generation hotel? And then what's the roadmap for a hotel, next generation hotel, that actually makes us money within a certain bounded period of time? So the enterprise architecture helping at that level, and that helps govern the solution architects and their associated subject matter experts to work on, let's say, a mobile phone capability to open a hotel door in the next generation hotel. So again, we start to see, with a more disruptive technology, the need for deeper expertise in solutions, because you just can't check out a book at the library and say, how do I do this next generation stuff? It's happening so quickly. So that's another argument for why we need to have more cohesion between the enterprise architects, who are more big picture strategists, even in terms of how do I scope the work, and then the solution architects who say, how do we deliver the work, and get that dialogue going iteratively in the architecture space that then will help us in the engineering link up as well. So EAs have historically often been seen as too academic, too philosophical, too disconnected, as I said at the start, even with enterprise portals. How often were enterprise architects really involved 15 years ago? So a lot of boxes within boxes, frameworks within frameworks, a lot of meta model this and data model that, and then also often seen as just something for very large organizations, not something for small or medium-sized organizations, because so much overhead just to keep track of everything as you try to do impact analysis across a complex landscape. That becomes a problem in and of itself, is just to collect and maintain the data about your landscape. So a lot of people say, I just rather solve the problems. Let's just keep solving problems every quarter, and we'll be fine. So it does take, in order to have successful enterprise architecture function, it does need that top-down support, because it takes patience to build the maturity that I was speaking of. But you're not gonna satisfy even the most patient of people if you're not more closely linked to solution architects. And that's our point. Because the sponsorship will slip if they're not seeing results in a reasonable time frame, like 9 months or so. If they're not seeing real changes, they're going to start to say, are we just creating byproducts and not true products as we're spinning our wheels here? So some people have said that EA is so important. Of course, we need it as a permanent capability, and we need to keep. We need a data architect, application architect, technical architect, security architect, and so on. And I'm saying, yes, we need those skills, and we also need solution architects. But the point is, does it have to be all full time? So we have to rethink our model in terms of how do we build a team that's sustainable, because often people build a big EA team, including solution architects, but then they disband it, and all that's left are the solution architects at the end of the day. So again, the model of how to, what's the right dose of EA to help in organizations is a difficult issue, one that needs more study. But we definitely are strong advocates of enterprise architecture. We're just saying enterprise architects have to be perceived as indispensable to helping frame the problems that the solution architects then help to pull the resources together to actually solve those problems. So we want to benefit from the solution architects being a part of our team. They are the engine room. Without SAs, solution architects on board, the EA function will struggle. EA can't succeed without the help of SAs in one form or another. So the question is just, how do we build that reciprocal relationship where the solution architects understand enterprise architects what they need, and vice versa. Also could consider guerrilla EA in terms of rather than building a massive team, is you keep your team kind of to the core, and you socialize and motivate the SAs to do more of the EA level work. And that's, as I said, ironically, what often happens is that people end up saying they want an enterprise architect, but what their job description and interviews, everything is pointing to, they want solution architects. So we're already, that's not necessarily a hard move for a very expensive solution architects with the right mindset, who are kind of big picture oriented, to step in and actually be very effective enterprise architects. So as I said, they would be, in many cases, the last people to go. The philosophers might be the first people to go. So it's hard to sustain a large EA team. So you might say, well, let's think about a more, a tighter team, but one that can scale up, scale down, but one that solves problems. And that's where, again, it may take more linkage even to the engineering side and the whole agile side of things. So the team manager for such a team that included solution architects is going to have to understand their respective roles. And that's where I've said that it does take some education and training. And it's not that much, but even a few days can take you a long way, because you are trying to, in fact, ultimately architect solutions for extra productivity, extra modernization, to be competitive in a very complex and ever-changing world. So,
Steve, you want to
yes, yeah. So yeah, let's take a. Let me take a breath and go ahead with the question.
All right. So one is you need to lift the camera just a bit so we can see. We're seeing half your head. There we go. Much better.
All right.
For those who just joined us, the topic is being presented by Dr. Stephen Els. Does anybody have any questions at this time? And does everybody know where to ask their questions?
So it's at Slido, sli.do, event 9602. You can ask questions, you can make comments, and that's going to be open through the 1st of August. So that's one reason we use that. So rather than just chat, so that you can post your questions and we can get back to you if you leave your name and contact information. We can get back to you with an answer if we don't have time at the end of the session today to answer your questions.
We have several questions, Steve. You want to engage in a couple?
Sure.
Okay. First question by Greg. How would EA apply to higher education type business universities?
Well, that's a very good question, and I can say that I've had some firsthand experience with that. I was asked to come to Columbia University and help them establish their enterprise architecture program. And this was earlier this year, as a matter of fact, or late last year. And they have 17 campuses in a 50 city block area there in New York, in Manhattan. And the CIO driven, saying we must do enterprise architecture. I want my top people who are in the security side, the IT side, and people that he had authority over, to say, let's understand the business better, and let's become masters of this architecture landscape. So he's rolling out a framework plus modeling languages and tools. So pretty much doing something I'm introducing in a moment, the Open Group Architecture Framework, or TOGAF, plus the Archimate. Archimate as an architecture definition language, as a consistent language to help people understand their stakeholders, the concerns of the stakeholders, the goals, for the change, including in a place in academia of all places, which is very siloed by its very nature. So it's very relevant. It's one of the bastions of greatest resistance, though. So that's where, again, you see it has to be top-down driven, and but there's huge opportunity there, as there is in government, in terms of, I won't call it fraud, waste, and abuse, but a lot of duplication, a lot of inefficiency, because everybody wants to do it their own siloed way.
Okay, next question, then we can go back to you speaking from Chris. I have EA training and act in an SA role. What is the professional value of studying E and SA?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to understand what does it mean to be an architect, right? There's too much of this, well, I'm an enterprise architect or I'm a solution architect. What does it mean to be an architect, right? So that's it's the design thinking, but design thinking to frame the problem, the more detailed design thinking to solve the problem. So in our enterprise and solution architecture offering, which I'm just going to mention at the end of this, it's something that we originally did for the British Computer Society, and we have our own variation of that as well, and we customize it as well for particular organizations, because they don't necessarily want just a generic approach. They want to solve their problems. But as I said, it's looking across architecture and linking enterprise and solution architecture, but also understanding the engineering side. So it's what does it mean to be an architect? What's the type of thinking that's involved? Whether you're an enterprise architect, solution architect, software architect. So that's it. It opens up the world. I'll just say that I've had a lot of people who take framework training. Let's say TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework, but then they take the enterprise and solution architecture course and they go, God, I thought we already covered so much in the framework class, and now there's another whole body of knowledge on just what does it mean to be an architect and how to architect beyond just mastering one method. So anyhow, I've said, well, would you take the ENSA first? Or if you had to take one, which one would you take? And it's inevitable. They always say they would take both. But they say that often they would start with TOGAF, because TOGAF, or a framework, especially TOGAF, because it's comprehensive and it really gives you good understanding of not just a method, but of content, of techniques, of governance, and how to set up a team, how to run a team. So it has a lot there, in terms of then, okay, well, now how do I architect? And that's where the enterprise and solution architect and more emphasis on solution architecture overall is how do I actually, what are the types of problems I'm expected to solve, and how am I supposed to collaborate? And so again, it's a nice kind of a capstone on top of a framework training, is to understand architecture discipline more broadly and more deeply.
Okay. This is the moderator, Maury, again. In case you're wondering if Steve is talking out of his private plane, he actually is not. He's sitting in a car. He just he was on a plane for 18 hours, so he's a little tired. But we had committed to have this webinar. So in case you're wondering, is he in a rocket? Is he in a plane? He's actually sitting in a car.
Well, the reason I bought the Jaguar is because it's like my airplane. Now, I was a pilot in the Air Force, and I started flying when I was 16. The last plane I flew was the French Mirage 2000. And then I say the first time I drove the Jag, I said, boy, it's just like flying jets again. So, yeah, so I'm kind of flying jets here. I also have the architect pilot domain, so yeah, architect pilot. But yeah, I'm actually in a Jag right now, and just one thing kind of ran into another. But so I'm depending on my hotspot and Maury and the team. But it's the same presentation, and wherever it's delivered, it's virtual anyway, right?
Absolutely. For those who are attending at this moment, there are many classes that we offer at EA Principles, which cover the material that Steve is covering now. And of course, we are going to try to address all the questions that have been given to us so far. It's already 36 minutes into the presentation. So if we're not successful in answering all the questions during the webinar, we will answer them after the webinar with Steve's penmanship.
And again, you don't have to put your real name on, you don't have to put your contact information on Slido, but it needs to we're able to reply to the questions there if it's been set up correctly. But we'll just say @anonymous #1 or whatever. But ideally, you use a name so we can reply to a name, even if it's not your real name, so that you can see answers to your questions. So all the questions that are posted, all the good ones, we will answer in writing, and that's why we mentioned the event 9602. That's a Slido. Okay.
Okay, Steve, back to the presentation, please.
Okay, so I don't have a whole lot more slides here. Again, emphasizing that however EA works in your organization, it won't succeed if it's disconnected from solution architecture. So I have a couple more examples I want to give you. The BP with the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. One of the things to mitigate for them was that all their architects had to be trained in TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework. So I'm in Chicago, I'm training some of their folks, and one guy, we got to the point where it was time to build a roadmap and work with solution architecture. And he said, well, we don't do that at BP. And I said, well, maybe that's why you're in the class here, okay? Because we're not here to learn how you do it at BP. I didn't say that in an unfriendly way, but actually we're here to see how to integrate the EA capability analysis and framing of the opportunity and the problem space with the solution possibilities. So it's that integration. That's why, in fact, there was a change to get BP to take TOGAF, because it's set up to kind of insist that the enterprise architects work with the solution architects. But part of my suggestion here is that the solution architects need to be more tightly integrated into the overall EA framework itself, not just now we bring them on and talk to them for road mapping. So the Open Group Architecture Framework, though, does assume that you're working in the space of solution architecture in any case. So the other thing, though, that I bring back the maturity angle. I've trained at two different organizations that were called Enterprise Solution Architecture Organization, or the Department of Enterprise Solution Architecture, and I thought they were really onto something because I said they get it, but actually they didn't get it. They were very tactical because that word solution, so it's a difficult balance, because if you're too EA-ish, then you're not going to last. If you're too solution, you're not going to last. As an architecture team, you just become technical leads. So there is a balance, and it has to be sponsored from above, that balance of that it's enterprise and solution architecture working as a combined integrated team. But it's not just a bunch of glorified solution architects. The other point I would make, though, where I've seen it work very well, is at Harley-Davidson. Harley-Davidson is of course, a Fortune 500 company, and they took on TOGAF, but basically the chief architect inherited 20 solution architects and said, I need to make these guys and gals enterprise architects. So that's part of, again, the genesis for this talk, is he's saying, look, I need that technical prowess on my team, but I need them to know they no longer are going to configure the cell phones. They're going to figure out the value chain and the supply chain for the cell phones. But they all want to tinker because they were solution engineers. Now they've kind of been changed to solution architects. But I needed them to commit to call themselves in the business card and everything that they're an enterprise architect, because they're not tied to just one solution. They're in supporting the success of one solution. They're supporting the success of all the solutions, even though they have expertise perhaps in one domain. So again, an area where they've embraced, almost by default, they had to, because the people that were provided for the A team were almost all of them were solution engineers. And that's another point, is that a lot of people, I find 80% of the people that I train are solution architects. So who want to know more about enterprise architecture, in some cases enterprise and solution architecture. So it is interesting to see that. So it's not as much top-down driven as I would like to see it. Now, it's a lot of ambitious solution architects who want to move up the food chain, and they want to say, I want to work more from the bigger picture and kind of help manage multiple solutions. So it's kind of a career path for solution architects to become enterprise architects. But I'm saying that that's fine, that's well and good. But what we need ultimately is ENSA to work so well that people will demand it, and it'll be more top-down driven, that we need enterprise and solution architecture approach. And that's kind of what I'm proposing in here. And again, it's just a teaser. It's just an overview, because we're very limited on time, and it is a big topic. But I hope you sense, that these are different, but they need each other. Okay. The other thing, if I just come back to here, solution architecture needs the processes, products, and patterns that work within a wider EA context. So you might have a great reference architecture for how to do the ERP, but what about other patterns and other reference architectures for other solutions, and more globally, more strategic patterns? So there are a couple of books I'll mention briefly here that we use in some of our graduate training. One is called Collaborative EA. That's the short title, but you can find it on Amazon. But it talks about some of the problems that enterprise architecture has had because it hasn't been practical enough, and it's perceived as too ivory tower. And so the word collaborative is very important. Collaborative EA, for solving the most common types of problems. How do you work with solution architects? How do you work with Agile? How do you work with Kanban? So that's a very good book, Collaborative EA. And the other book that I think would be useful is think of this. Well, there's a book that I'm coming out with in August on the customer solution architecture methodology. So that's combining solution architecture / engineering with enterprise architecture. So that's a book that's coming. But I'll put in the Slido some notes for some recommended reading afterwards. So a couple quick points here. So I mentioned TOGAF. TOGAF is the Open Group Architecture Framework, so the opengroup.org. So some of you may not be that familiar with it, but it is a globally recognized kind of logo for the Open Group and for its method. the architecture development method. And I'll just give you the 30-second primer. Preliminary is your EA capability. You set up the capability so that you can cycle by cycle tackle problems. But wouldn't it be nice if you were solving the right problem? Well, that's where you would need solution architects helping you to scope the visioning part, right, for up front even. So that's where I'm saying solution architecture is very important, to be involved with scenario work, with design work right up front. So you're solving the right problem. Then you look at it from business perspective, from information systems perspective, from technology perspective, how they all interrelate in terms of where we at versus where we want to go. We pull our gaps together as requirements, and then working with solution architects and subject matter experts, what are the work packages, the building blocks that are going to get us from where we're at to where we want to be, to our targets. So this is the solution architecture part of TOGAF. But again, working with the enterprise architects, solution architects, and with ultimately the development teams, procurement, and so forth. So ADM is a very good foundational training to that at least moves us in that direction. But what we bring into the ENSA class is that TOGAF still is very high level. So we bring in the advanced year methods approach, which is more solution architecture. So we take a deeper dive to say, well, how do we initiate a program? How do we architect? How do we plan? So we take a deeper dive in these four big boxes here. So like in the middle, instead of requirements management, we have management overall. So it's a very complementary framework. A lot of people are not aware of. I'll just point out that the website is advancedyear.website. So it's a colleague of mine I've worked with for many years, and his hobby is his website. But Advanced Year Methods, he gets this whole enterprise and solution architecture thing, and so this is a framework that he developed, but he developed it not to compete with TOGAF, but to take TOGAF deeper. So anyway, I'm not going to go through this right now, but I'm saying that if you could boil down these 10 circles into four boxes, this is the way to do it. Initiate, architect, plan, govern. Of course, you have to manage. You have to manage all that. So in the enterprise and solution architecture class, we basically also teach, we review TOGAF, but we also bring in the advanced year methods. Now, where that's important in the big scheme of things here is that you have TOGAF, which is the typical one that, most architects should be trained in TOGAF and ideally certified. I mentioned the British Computer Society. They have the ENSA reference model. So that's some of our certification training is just on that reference model. But we also do training that's to make that's overlapping, so you get certified in both the advanced year methods and the BCS. So it's not just about a reference model, it's about the method. So Archimate I mentioned, CSC has approach to change. So enterprise architecture is about change, right? We're about moving to the future. We talked about the EAS strategy book, and then there's IBM's view of EA. I looked this up on Google, actually, IBM's view of EA, and it took me to a very good website that summarized, what IBM thinks of EA. But it does, as you might imagine, put a big emphasis on solutions in IBM, right? They want to sell their solutions. So there is the enterprise architecture part, solution architecture part, and just the solutions writ large. But this is the website. It's a difficult website to navigate, but it's just full of material. One reason for the training that we do is that you become very knowledgeable about, in a more structured way, about everything on that website, that Advanced Year website. So just a quick glimpse at the Advanced Year methods is, again, the four boxes here. It's to complement and help you drill down from a high-level EA approach to say, let's go ahead and solve this EA program. Let's get more practical. And so it is an architecture development process, not just an enterprise architecture development process. So that's just show you a couple slides on it. That it moves us again from baseline to target. Does include the governance. So I like it's elegant. It's elegant compared to the 10 circles of TOGAF, but at the same time, it has nice substeps for these four big phases. So again, we we know that TOGAF is very useful because we're able to train people globally in 3 to 4 days. And often they say, now I get it. I know what it's like to be an architect. But then once we show them the other side, the enterprise and solution architect, course with the advanced year methods built in, they go, well, now I really know. So there's a lot to know, but a lot to actually can be learned in a couple of weeks' time. Throw in some Archimate, and in less than a month, you've got 3 graduate courses of architecture training. So the thing, this is very true, and I know we have some people from my graduate course in this session right now, and they would say, well, TOGAF is kind of high level. It tells you do this and do that, but often it doesn't tell you how to do it. And that's true. And it's almost on purpose because it's saying, well, TOGAF is generic, so you're going to have to figure out how to do it for yourselves in many cases. Well, some people say, well, I'd like a little more advice, please. I want, so again, it says develop the target architecture in the context of the architecture vision. How do I do that? And do I only want one target architecture? Maybe I should have 3 candidate architectures, right? I mean, just as an example. So it's more sophistication comes with a little bit more training beyond just the high level TOGAF. Like in phase A, it says to develop a value chain diagram. Well, what is a value chain diagram? Why do I need it? And how is that going to help me? And so in the ENSA class, we have you work with value chain diagrams. So that's the type of thing. And similarly in phase B, it says you should do a structured analysis to make sure your goals are all aligning with your technology choices, etc. How do you do that? Well, that's what we teach you in ENSA. We dive into that. And do a data dissemination diagram or view in information systems. Well, again, we allow you to go ahead and we force you to master some more of this beyond just know that those things are associated, that you actually learn how to do it in the class. And so it's kind of an advanced, it is a little more advanced than the TOGAF class, let's put it that way. But it covers a lot of ground, but it's about being an architect. And so that includes that you should do some modeling, and you should understand things like the value chain and data dissemination. It should be second nature to you. So, yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Many questions. Question from Laurent Bert. For application, portfolio, rationalization, which source of knowledge, best practices is best? EA or SA, body of knowledge?
Well, I think that most definitely is enterprise architecture. And I say that because, remember, I used the term architecture landscape earlier. So architecture landscape, and I ask people often, to what degree would you say on a scale of 1 to 5 that you're a master of your architecture landscape? And they go, what's an architecture landscape, right? So the architecture landscape, that's all the processes, all of the building blocks, both business and technical, that are giving you the capabilities that you possess, right? Hopefully aligned to your mission. So application landscape is the sweet spot of that architecture landscape. So in the first 90 days of being an enterprise architect, I would say I need to know that you've mastered the application landscape, or at least that you've started to master it, because that's the sweet spot. Because the application landscape is the sweet spot between the business processes and services and the platforms that support them. Right, so that's an enterprise architecture thing. Whereas the solution architecture is saying, what applications do I need to do X, Y, Z, right? And how would I do them? Enterprise architecture is saying, how do I get the capabilities? It's a completely different question. So we would look, and we're trying to rationalize, saying, look, I have a lot of applications that do the same thing. My vision is of a defragmented landscape, right? And so that's enterprise architecture work. And then the solution that I end up coming up with at the end may be using a pattern or something, an architecture pattern. That was the other book that I was going to recommend. The Enterprise Architecture Patterns is the other book. So I mentioned collaborative EA and then enterprise architecture patterns. So what's an enterprise architecture pattern that would help me defragment? So once you figure out the pattern, so it's still an enterprise, it's at the enterprise architecture level, because you're looking at your whole landscape to say, where's the redundancy? where are the opportunities to streamline here and streamline, digitize, automate? Okay. Any other question?
Oh, there's plenty. Okay, next one from Chris. Is E and SA the new EA?
That's basically where I'm headed. But I'm headed. I'm saying that EA, as it's been traditionally done, whether it's just big picture, big picture, big picture, big team, big picture. It's I've been a part of too many EA teams that got cut as soon as money got tight. So it's just not been able to mature as a discipline in terms of academic bona fides and so forth, to where it's really it's totally credible. And so I think that the synergy between enterprise solution architecture is key. Also, to again, let's face it, when you're setting up an EA practice, you're solving a problem. So what becomes the pattern to do that successfully? TOGAF helps, but then, as I said, diving in more deeply with pattern in terms of let's take a little more deeply. What exactly do I do? And that's where we said we're solving the problem of setting up an EA practice. So we're getting more granular. So I think that the solution architecture thinking is problem solving, and I think that we have to be oriented toward that in order to be perceived ultimately as problem solvers. So I do think
okay.
ENSA framework, I think that's where it's headed. One other case study I was going to give you real quick was I was with a training Bridgestone. It was a very interesting setup there in Nashville. That's like the Bridgestone city. Nashville, Tennessee. So I had the head of enterprise architecture was in the class, and that was a subsection of a department that had enterprise architecture plus solutions delivery. So he had the EA team in there, and then during the first day of class, he got promoted. Suddenly now he's the head of enterprise architecture and solutions delivery. So I find that, again, it's hard to isolate yourself and say you're just enterprise architects. That's part of my point. Because if there is a big solution design or delivery going on, you're going to be implicated in some ways. You might as well beef up, in terms of the knowledge. It's not about how many people are formally, on the payroll. It's what are the knowledge, skills, and maturity to tackle the most disruptive problems that you could face in a modern world. So definitely, I think it's ENSA is the way ahead. But only when you do that are you going to be able to more closely link to agile development challenges and how that ties back into visioning. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. For more information about everything that Steve, well, I shouldn't say everything, because I'm sure you can spend almost a month engaging conversation with Steve, because he's a wealth of knowledge. We have a class that's running August 15th. It's running in the DC area, DC meaning Washington, DC, and you can also attend the class remotely. We run the class usually with students from all over the United States and sometimes from overseas. So it's not unusual to attend the class remotely. And this specific class is running in DC and also in the Northern Virginia area, Tyson's Corner to be specific. If anybody has any questions, feel free to call me. My name is Maury, 301-213-1333. Also, the questions that did not get answered today, just because we are coming to a point we have to bring closure, is you can look at the slide that Steve has up right now. It mentions a variety of classes that are coming up, not just what was discussed today, but also the British Computer Society ENSA certification, and so on. Dr. Steve will respond to the questions that did not get answered today. What do you think, Steve, in the next 2 days?
That board is going to be alive through the 1st of August, and I think the event, you just won't be able to add things after that. But we're going to go in there after tonight and answer questions. But people can know that still we're going to be checking it at least through the 1st of August. So that way you don't have to just do a lot of emails back and forth. You can ask questions, because you're also asking questions of other people who also have that code, that 9602 code. So they can reply as well as myself. But if you want to, I mentioned advanced year methods. That's actually subsumed in the ENSA certification program. So that's a subset of
Yeah.
that bigger certification. So I mentioned that the one individual who has the advanced year website, he helped build this curriculum, and so he's continued to refine his method. So it's a subset of this. So you have these. Those who want slides need to write to ask for the slides, because we don't want to bombard people, because we had a lot more people sign up than actually showed up, and we don't want to just hit everybody with the slides if they're really not that interested. But if you want these slides, please let us know. You could put that on Slido with your contact information, or you could email it to Fawn. That's easy to remember. And we're all one big family, so we'll all get it, and make sure that you only get one set, not 100 emails. Luke is also one of our business managers. I put him up here as well. But Maury, just put on Slido, Maury, your contact information, so they can visit the Slido. It's again Slido, sli.do or slido.com, doesn't matter, and it's event 9602. So we'll put more announcements there and things like that, takeaways from this session. But I wanted to, there's just as we're down to our last minute, I just had a couple of questions, just they're rhetorical here, but does your EA practice, if applicable, have solution architects on the team now? If you have solution architects, do they have an explicit method for doing solution architecture? So that's part of our training, is to help give people a method that's the architecture method, whether it's enterprise or solution architecture, you have a method that works. And then what kind of generic solutions architecture training are you familiar with? I suspect there's not a lot of generic solutions architecture training out there. It's often proprietary, tied to a particular vendor. All right, so this was just to review the operating model point of view, that EA is kind of philosophical, saying what are the requirements for integration and standardization. And for enterprise architecture, why did it grow at all? Why are we doing it at all? And then this is advanced year method here, just to lay out. So it's just again, what's the genesis of EA as we know it, and why are we even thinking about adding in solution architecture to it? And again, AAM is even if you get certified in advanced year method through our ENSA training, does that prove that you're an architect? No, it does not. All right. But all of our training is to help people accelerate their knowledge, skills, and maturity to be better architects. And we see that manifested by being able to provide better informed decisions faster, right? Whether it's a global change or it's a very focused change. And so again, just trying to put into perspective here, the higher level versus the more focused level, and saying here that if it's consolidation of service, since we were asked earlier, the question is that EA or is that SA? And it says here, which one would least likely to need an architect, an enterprise solution architect? We're saying maybe consolidating servers, but still maybe architecture would help. Solution / enterprise architecture, but we're saying here often the technology specialist can do it, without a lot of collaboration. Last slide here is just to show you the richness of this space here. And we talk, and this is what we cover in the enterprise and solution architecture classes. We take you what's the domain level, enterprise level, solution level, and then software and technical level, and then we look at it across these domains: business, the data / information, applications, and infrastructure technology. So we end up covering this material. So you feel very confident, not just as again as an enterprise architect, but also a solution architect, but to know these in order to help and know some of this. So how do you work? And again, we're bringing in cloud, we're bringing in automation and mobile and all that into the discussion of the solution space. So this is just a kind of a high level mapping of how we bring enterprise architecture to solution architecture to actual down to the nitnoids there. Okay, so I gave you a quiz. That's one quick point on that. I'm going to give you another quiz, but I'm gonna send to everyone a code to a 10-question quiz. I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll just see how you do on that. I like to call my quizzes pre-test, in terms of don't expect you to get the answers right, but it's kind of fun to see if you can pull the right answers out from all the clever distractors. So we're going to give you a code to take a practice quiz on enterprise and solution architecture as a reward for attending this session. Thank you very much for participating. And we've, as I said, we've recorded this, and we'll make the link available and the slides available to those who participated.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you to everybody for attending, taking time from your busy schedule. We look forward to our next webinar. Dr. Steve, what is the subject? Do you know what the next subject is for the next webinar?
Well, there's a couple subjects played, but one that's really prominent for me right now is government architecture, architecting for the government. So that'll be either the next one or the one after.
Okay. So for those who are still online, stay tuned. We're going to send you the information about the next webinar, which will be in late August sometime. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve.
All right.
Bye-bye.